Hey y'all, Daniel Alexander here in Fayetteville, Arkansas on a beautiful spring day, and I was just going for a run and I stopped at this park. It's a nice park near where I'm living right now, and I thought I'd share some ideas with you guys. And it just so happened to be one of my favorite flowers popping up in this field, and it is the dandelion. It is one of, if not my most favorite flower, and I think I love it because of its expression, because of its form, but also because of its, it's a weed basically. What does that mean? It's a plant that can live in very harsh conditions, very shallow, infertile soils. So, there's something profound about that as well, and just its structure is I think the thing that really mesmerizes me the most. Just that sort of fractality that it beautifully expresses, and as well, of course, the five spiral. If you look at if I take off the seeds, I'll show you guys in a second. I guess I'll go ahead and, well, I can't blow it yet. It's too beautiful. I want to talk about that fractality first. I think this is a beautiful expression, and it really, some ideas to connect with this are like the idea of the Big Bang. And, for some of you that might be a large leap, but for me, there's such congruence there, and it really is a beautiful symbolic kind of representation of that expression, that there is this, this flower. Of course, dandelions start out as that yellow flower. I'm sure you all have seen, and once they get fertilized, right, once they get pollinated, the yellow flower will close up. The seeds will, in essence, engorge and harden, and those kind of fluffy fractal feather-like, I don't know, extrusions will form, and so then the yellow kind of casing will fall off, and this will open up. This white fluffy flower will open up, and then after a big rain, when the ground is moist, these guys will get carried off in the wind and plant themselves. And so in terms of connecting that with greater ideas, like the idea of a Big Bang, a Big Bang, and when I say that, my conception is a little different than the standard scientific understanding of the Big Bang, because I recognize that every outward motion must have an inward motion in congruence, and that there is no really start or beginning in terms of a infinite universe. And that is my paradigm, is an infinite universe, and I've talked about that in other videos. But here I'll just express that this flower, although it itself has a relative beginning and end, right? And really, we could trace that beginning and end in either direction forever, and so it's a relative beginning and end, in the sense that the genetic material that goes into this flower, that potential always existed, and that potential has morphed and transformed and transmuted itself to this point throughout time, and so we could even trace that genetic memory, so to speak. But this, this flower, I guess the idea that there is an insemination, right, a pollination, there is information material that comes into the flower as a catalyst to, as a seed, or just as a, you could even say a sort of fulcrum, but a catalyst to set in motion this fractal expression that ultimately goes on to repeat that whole pattern. So meaning that, these many seeds are formed and carried off in the wind to repeat another Big Bang, so to speak. And so on a universal level, that is theoretically what is occurring, is that we have, this energetic material that is condensing and expressing on the level of galactic formations, on the level of stars, on these grander universal levels, and of course the same thing would be happening on the atomic, subatomic level as well. And so it's that process that really is important to understand, this process of insemination and then catalyzed unfoldment from that central point of expression. So for this flower, we can see there's the stem. The stem is the sort of central point of expression that fractalizes outward towards the infinite-sided sphere, so to speak, right? And every little hair could be like a vertice upon this spherical plane. Okay, but we do know, however, that this singular stem has fractal roots into the ground as well, and so it is balanced in its total expression, just like a magnetic field is balanced in its total expression. Some of you might not know this, but there is a sort of polar, like a an angular tilt in a magnetic field. There is a and I forget which side there is, but in essence, one of the it's either the north or south pole, doesn't really matter, but one spin relative to our location, because it could be a relative phenomenon based on where on the earth we are existing, but there's tends to be a sort of shift in the magnetic field, right? And so kind of what I'm trying to get at is that there is a sort of shift in this, if we understand this as a magnetic field, because really, if we get down to the essence of what a magnetic field is, it's just a toroidal flow through center. Okay, so this expression, if we include the roots, if we include the petals and just the total energetic expression of it, is this toroidal flow through center. And so it does represent a sort of magnetic field. However, it's not the same, ferromagnetism that we think of in terms of, the magnets that stick on your refrigerator. This would sort of be, a magnetic flow on a different density or dimension, or just a different level. So, yeah, that concept, kind of what I was just expressing in terms of this toroidal flow, this magnetic flow, is present everywhere. And it's funny because, I grew up just like everyone else. I was brought up in the public school systems and, had a very standard education, and, wasn't introduced to any of this type of thinking or understanding. But it's like now it's just so blatantly obvious that if we were to just take off the filter and begin to perceive our reality and recognize the patterns persisting throughout all of nature, it's so simple and so obvious, and there is a sort of understanding to be had in terms of how our universe flows and interacts and manifests itself. So, I feel like there's this notion, and sort of in the mainstream science community and in the physics community, that the universe is beyond our understanding, and that we're still looking for that ultimate equation. And the reality is there's not going to be an equation, because the equations are arising from the infinitude. So sure, you can have algorithms and equations that represent a sort of fractal expression. We've already done that. The Mandelbrot set, which you should go look up, was sort of that one of those original fractal expressions that was just so profound and really created a sort of shift in the human consciousness. There's a spider on me. And it helped just sort of facilitate an understanding of the reality that we're existing in. And so, we can, I don't know, I'm including a lot in this video, but why not? I feel like the best way for me to share is just to kind of go on these rants and just express whatever comes to me. And so with that idea of the fractal, right? The fractal expression that we can, have a mathematical formula for, it shows us the sort of pattern that the universe is doing, but we're never going to be able to, in essence, create with our finite mathematics the infinite universe. We can understand how it's created, right? We can say, okay, we have these finite equations, resulting in a sort of infinite fractal patterning. So how do we translate that to the totality of our existence? And really you add a few infinite dimensionalities and there you go, you have it. But you can't really there's no computer that will really truly be able to generate infinite dimensionalities, if that makes sense, right? Like in the sense that I'm getting bit. In the sense that between 0 and 1 is in essence an infinite dimensionality. There's infinite information contained in that space, and so if we create an infinite number of those, I don't know. It's infinite information, and no finite computing system can ever, in a single moment, contain the totality of that. It can contain the algorithms to generate, to look at any relative information within a spectrum of that. I don't know. A spectrum of dimensionality within that information, but it can never see the totality all at once, right? That's like set in stone in the sense that even the human mind can't do that, right? It can create a sort of finite fractal expression of the infinite information of the universe, but it can never contain the totality of that information. All right, back to the dandelion, because I know that was lots of tangent, and I hope I made some sense out of it. But there is an understanding of how nature works and how these things are expressed, and it really can be understood very simply. And yes, like understanding the sort of more in-depth chemical analysis of these energetic interactions can definitely be helpful, but it's not necessary to understand the overall picture, the way the energy moves and flows. So, time for this Big Bang to inseminate another part of this relative universe. And so, of course, those little dots on the tip of that flower are going to be arranged in a spiraling pattern that is actually not technically it's not the phi ratio, it's the Fibonacci sequence. And I think that is because this is a expression from a sort of 0 point. So you have to, start at 0, and in terms of, you know, how do you create the phi ratio when you're starting with a 0 point, well, that's what the Fibonacci sequence does, is it starts with, well, technically it starts with 1, and then you add what's previous to 1, which is 0, so you get another 1, then you add the 1 before that, which is 2, so on and so forth. I'm sure you guys know about the Fibonacci sequence. If not, go look it up. But yeah, that expression is so potent to, and it's so important in terms of understanding this reality. You know, understanding fractals is important, and understanding the phi ratio, because the phi ratio is how you achieve perfect fractality. Okay, and that is like mathematically definable, that perfect fractality is achieved by the phi ratio. It's the only ratio that, gosh, I'm not going to say it right, but you know, that has I can't say it right now. Basically, it's infinitely scalable, that within a finite space, it's the only ratio that can go inward and outward infinitely. All right, the words are not coming to me right now. I'll talk about the phi ratio in another video, and I'll really kind of, and I think I have talked about it, but I'll really get at, you know, what it is in terms of this creation. But yeah, so I mean, all life is really using that ratio, because that ratio is perfect nesting. And if you are a tree or a plant, you want to strive towards that perfect nesting, because that's how you arrange your leaves to catch the most light, right? That's how you put the most information in a small space, right? That's basic. It's how you create a sphere with the most information contained within it, okay? And yeah, so ultimately, well, let me, I also grabbed this to show you guys. This is a sycamore seed ball, and I kind of took out the inside. Let's see if you guys can see that. Whoa. Hold on. Well, I don't know if you guys can see it. Dang. Basically, I just wanted you to see the sort of kind of, not honeycomb pattern, because so on a 2D plane, the most efficient shape to hold information is the hexagon, right? Or triangles, because in essence they're the same thing, right? 6 triangles can make up a hexagon. But the hexagon is unique because it has the most lines containing the most space. So on a 2D plane, it's the most efficient for encapsulating anything, right? That's why bees use it to make their honeycomb, to hold their honey. It's efficient, you know, yeah, it's efficient storage space. And so in terms of what, you know, that shape represents, the 6-sided shape is sort of the capacitive storing shape. Or a lot of rocks, like quartz crystals, have a hexagon lattice structure, and the water molecule, right, when you see the little snowflake, it's that 6-sided structure. So it's this sort of, you know, extreme efficiency in terms of packing of information. And where on the other hand, like the 5-sided shape, the 5-pointed star, the pentagon, and the, I guess, the pentagram, those are deeply embedded with the phi ratio, and something to kind of kind of extrapolate from that idea is the the 6 kind of represents more of this, again, this capacitance, this structure that can be embedded, and then the 5 is more of the outward expressing life forms, relating more to the phi ratio and things like that. And so something that's interesting, it's like nearly all 5-petaled flowers make an edible fruit. All right, don't go eating every fruit that comes from a 5-petaled flower without looking into it. But it's like, if not all of them, it's like close to, 99% of the flowers that have 5 petals will make a fruit that is somewhat edible. So it's just something to think about, something interesting. And a lot of 6-petaled flowers are poisonous. I think those are like, I think nightshades tend to be 6-petaled. But anyways, that's beside the point. Go observe nature for yourself, look at these patterns, find these things. But yeah, so this, this guy, because he is nested spherically on 3 dimensions, he's a little different than that kind of flat plane nesting. He's still going to have embedded a sort of phi ratio expression, but it's not going to be able to be recognized in the same way. But something to notice, anytime you have a sort of spherical embedding like this, you can kind of look at how many sides each little node has, and how many, I guess, little nodes, like pick one and count how many are around it. And usually it'll be 6, but it's not always 6, right? Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 7. But usually it's about 6, okay? And the reason is because, so the hexagon for a flat plane is the most efficient way to embed information. But once you start curving, you can't use the hexagon anymore, right? Its lattice structure would break, and so you have to insert the 5-sided and the 4-sided and the 7-sided and so on and so forth to kind of create that flexibility. And just something to kind of think about in terms of that. That's kind of like in terms of the structure of life. So all life is made up of basically hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, right? Those are the 4 main components. And so oxygen has 8 protons, right, and 8 electrons, and so it would kind of relate to the cubic lattice structure, and that's also why water, has 2 hydrogens embedded on an oxygen. In essence, it's the oxygen is sort of like a magnifying glass, or it's like the facilitates an expression, an elemental expression that burns, right? Oxygen burns. That's why things oxidize. And so what I'm trying to say is, so water, we see this 6-sided hexagonal structure, but actually that's just a 2-dimensional perspective. If we, really went down and looked at it in a 3-dimensional perspective, you would probably see a cube. And because the hexagon, when you look at a cube at a certain angle, the hexagon is present, right? And it can also be understood as the I'm blanking, as 2 tetrahedrons intersecting. I forget what that's called geometrically, but it relates to the Star of David, relates to a lot of things. Too much for right now. So the oxygen has 8 protons, so it relates to the cube. Carbon has 6, relates to the octahedron, right? Which is like 2 pyramids with their bases together. And so, and then you have hydrogen, which is like this kind of singular toroidal expression. Hydrogen is like this, the initial flame, so to speak, right? Has one proton, and so it's, hydrogen wants to react with everything. It needs to find stabilization in other, other forms, so to speak. It is the, if something is, well, it's the electrolyte, whatever. Go look into it more. But the point is, what is interesting is the nitrogen, right? So nitrogen is a very potent element in terms of growth, and specifically plant growth, right? And I think the way to kind of understand nitrogen is sort of this, it is the sort of buffering interaction to allow for this crystalline form to flow, and it sort of is, facilitates the reflection of light, right? It is seven-sided, like seven, the seven colors of the rainbow, the seven chords in a musical scale, so on and so forth. So it's the nitrogen that sort of creates this spectrum of light that facilitates the photosynthesis, that facilitates the plant growth. And so, that's more of an extrapolation of the science that I have understood. And so, there's not some scientific paper that I can cite right now, but that's just my extrapolation. And so you can kind of take, do with that what you will. But I think there's something to recognize there, that, the potency of nitrogen in the life process, and how it is this sort of, the seven. It is the middle ground between the 6 and the 8, and the facilitation of that organic flow, you might say. All right. Well, maybe I'll leave it at that. Nothing else is coming to mind, but point of the story is there is so much to learn from. Nature is our greatest teacher, and everything we need to know in terms of understanding the universe is present everywhere, right? You can see it in a single cell, you can see it in a single leaf, you can see it in a little sycamore seed ball, which I can plant the seeds of. And you can see it in the clouds and the sky, and just the interaction of all these things. There is a pattern, right? And I think really a place to start in terms of understanding that pattern would be the toroidal flow, and as well the fractal expression. Okay? Those are kind of like two sides of this etheric coin, so to speak. They relate to the idea